Okay, we're recording, and I'm with Jason Hamilton. Jason, thanks so much for joining me.
Man, thank you
For
so
this.
much for inviting me. I'm honored.
Yeah, no, I'm honored to have you on here. I was telling you just before we hit record that I've been watching your YouTube videos and trying the things that you talk about with AI, and it's really fantastic. So I was pumped to talk to you about it. Um, First, a little introduction. You've published 9 novels. High fantasy writer? Is that how you define
Yeah,
your work?
high fantasy, mythical fantasy. Yeah,
Yeah, nice. And you work for Kindlepreneur as the content manager, and you YouTube as the Nerdy Novelist, which is where we're going to focus on tonight because,
yeah.
yeah, because you've been doing amazing AI videos. Okay, so to kick us off, talk to us a little bit about what your writing life was like before you started using AI. We're going to do the classic, like before and after, like before and now. Yeah, so talk to me about what it was like before AI.
Oh man, I actually have a good story for this.
Oh,
So,
nice.
I wrote an 8 book series and published the whole thing. Was publishing the last couple right as I got married. And then, when you get married, you have like financial responsibility,
Yeah.
and and so I was just like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to really try to write to market, do all the things that we're told that we're supposed to do, have a rapid release, all of these
Hmm.
things. And I wrote the series. I wrote the first 2 books called the Fairy Queen series, which I'm just now republishing if
Nice.
anyone's interested. Um, I wrote the first 2 books, got them out there, spent like $1,000 on ads, um, and the whole thing just tanked.
Oh,
And I felt like I had done everything right. And
that's
given, my
yeah.
first series had done reasonably well for a first series, but these 2 novels just it I could not get them to perform well.
Mm,
And so that just I was in the middle of writing the third book at that time, and I just lost all
yeah.
motivation to
That's
keep
hard too. When you're
going.
in the middle of the third one, you're like, do I finish it?
Yeah, I lost all motivation. It was supposed to be
Oh
a six
man.
book series,
Yep.
and I was just, I cannot do that. And
Yeah.
I kind of spiraled at that point, and there was other
Oh,
things going on as well. I had some health issues, and
I
um,
have super been there. I have 2 unfinished series. I know exactly what you're talking about.
hmm
Yeah.
and and so I went through this period of burnout, and I did manage to finish the third book and the fourth book, but it took on average about a year each to get
Ooh,
them done. Whereas before, the first 8 books that I published, I'd written them in about a year and a half, all 8 of them.
nice.
And so it was a huge production drop for
Hmm.
me. And you want to talk about AI entering the picture?
Yeah. Yeah. Just keep going, man. So what happened?
All right. So because of my work, I had dabbled a little bit in AI, but not for writing fiction, mostly just as a way of writing articles and trying to increase my productivity with writing articles for websites and such. I'm of course the content manager for Kindlepreneur. I'm not using AI to write any of those articles, but we are. But professionally, we like to stay up to date
Yeah,
on things, and
totally. I work for a tech
and we've
company, and I started playing with it at work first too.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I dabbled with Jasper, it used to be called Jarvis, and some of the other AI tools out there. They were like okay, but nothing really amazing. And then of course ChatGPT came out and blew everyone's socks off. And again, I started working with it mostly for online article writing.
Mm,
And my first, I think, weekend, it was a couple of days really playing around with ChatGPT. I wrote about 12 articles for a personal website.
nice.
And that was just a huge eye opener for me. And so at first I was just playing around with it for articles because it was really better for that and still is.
And
And
that's
then,
probably like 36,000 words, right? In a
oh yeah,
weekend, like about 3,000 words an article.
yeah,
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
2 to 3,000 words per article. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so then GPT-4 came out, and in playing around with GPT-4, in case, and if our listeners aren't familiar, this is just basically the next iteration of the language model that was used in ChatGPT. Um, playing around with GPT-4, I had decided, okay, this is now good enough
Mm,
that I can write fiction with it.
nice.
And before I tried to use well, the previous iteration, GPT 3.5, to write fiction before, and it was okay, but it required so much editing that it almost wasn't worth it. You might
Mm.
as well just do it yourself, kind of thing. And then in using GPT-4, I was just like, okay, I can work with this. I can make something of it.
And it's behind the paywall, right? GPT-4 is it's
Yes,
20, but it's not a lot. It's $20 a month,
you
but it
currently have
is,
to
yeah.
subscribe $20 a month for ChatGPT Plus.
Yeah.
I imagine at some point they'll probably roll that out, but even for paid subscribers, there's a limit right now to how much of it you can use at a given time.
Hmm.
There's a cap of, I think currently it's 25 messages per 3 hours or something like
Yeah.
that. And that's probably going to change as well as they get things ramped up. But yes, that's how you access GPT-4. And I really wouldn't use anything else if you're trying to write actual prose. You need
Mm.
a language model as strong as GPT-4. GPT 3.5 is still good for some things. I still use it for brainstorming. I still use it for summarizing,
Hmm.
things like that.
Yeah, I've been using it to like define character voice,
Hmm.
develop casts of voices. It's good for that stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So bringing this back around to the burnout that I had,
Yeah.
I'm now I've now rebranded those books that tanked. I've got one, two, three, and four already set and ready to go. And I'm currently sidetracked with a book that I'm writing specifically for my YouTube channel. But once that's over, I'm getting right back into it to finish that series with books 5 and 6. And I plan on using AI to write those. At first, I was hesitant to do that because I thought, well, what if the style is super different? But having played around with AI enough, I'm not too worried about that. And plus, AI can help in so many different ways besides the actual writing, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit. But um, the cool thing about AI, and I've noticed this talking to a lot of other people in the communities that have built up around AI writing, many of us have dealt with some form of burnout,
Hmm.
or we have some kind of neurological, I don't want to say disorder, but uh, we're on
Difference.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, difference,
Yep.
like
Neurodivergent.
ADHD,
Yeah.
um, very, if you're on the spectrum in any way,
Hmm.
there, whatever the case may be, there are many reasons why you might want to use AI. And a lot of us, even before AI became a big thing, we were trying to use other forms of writing, like dictation. A lot of us were into dictation
Hmm.
before AI came around, because we were looking for these ways of being able to reduce the friction
Yeah.
of the actual putting down words,
Hmm.
because it's difficult for people in those situations.
I
Eh,
find I have anxiety. I find it just helps me get over the anxiety if I like just even using it as like a co-writer. If I just do one thing with
hmm
it, I can start writing after that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it gets you past that blank
Hmm.
page, right? And then it gives you something, and then you can work with that. And I've found, you'll hear psychologists talk a lot about decision fatigue.
Hmm.
And decision fatigue is a huge issue, whether we know it or not, when we're writing,
Yeah.
because we are constantly making tiny little decisions over and over again. And AI reduces that significantly.
Mm.
You're still making a lot of creative decisions, And I know a lot of people would say there isn't a lot of creativity with AI, but that's absolutely not true. In
Yeah,
fact,
we'll
I'd
get into
say,
prompts in a minute, and you can totally prove those people wrong with that.
oh yeah, there's still a lot of creativity that goes into it.
Yeah,
Um, and I was actually just listening to a podcast today, actually, where he was talking about how AI without creativity just doesn't work really well.
yeah,
Um, if you don't have that human aspect, that creative spark, what the AI puts out is just kind of boring and
yeah,
generic. But if you are being an actual human and like guiding this tool in a certain way, it can become really good.
yeah. A friend of
So,
mine and I were talking. My co-writer and I were talking last night, and he's using it far more than I am, and far more effectively than I am. And he was saying, you know, it requires a base level of knowledge of the craft that you're doing.
hmm
Like I don't know much about coding. I couldn't just code with ChatGPT because I wouldn't understand what it's giving me back, what's good, what's bad, what's, nonsense, what actually would work if for my circumstances. And not only that, I don't even know how to ask it questions about coding. Like I wouldn't even know
yeah,
how to what am I going to ask it? So
I'm the
make me
same way.
code. Yeah. So like, but it's the same. I think it translates with writing too. You have to come with a base knowledge of storytelling. You have to come with a base knowledge of before you can even get into like asking prompts, which we'll get into in a minute because like, for example, some of the prompts you use language that only an insider would understand. Um yeah. So anyway, so you felt like you were able to use it to start kind of overcoming this slow slump and it's reinvigorated your writing some.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Um, I'm only spending maybe an hour a day of fiction writing
Hmm.
these days. And in that hour, I'm able to get a minimum of 3,000 words done and good, like, I'm not talking like just generating words. I'm talking about I generate the words and then I edit them and make them my own. And, I think there are people producing significantly more than that, but that's also way more than I used to write, you know, just hand typing it.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like your goal is to crank out a book a day. Like that doesn't
No.
sound, it doesn't sound to me like that's what your dream is as a writer, is like I'm just going to create a novel every day. And yeah.
Yeah, and I actually believe that quantity, a lot of people are going to go straight to quantity with AI. Like, how many books can I put out now with this? And I actually think that that is not going to be the approach that works in the upcoming future. I think there are going to be people testing that. I know Michael Anderle, if you know him in the indie community, he recently
Yeah.
made a huge announcement that they were going to try and make 10,000 books with AI
Hmm.
in a year. And I think that's cool that he's doing that to really push the boundaries and help people see what's possible. But I also don't think that quantity, I mean, the market's already saturated, right?
Yeah.
And it has been ever since indie authors really became a big thing as a
Hmm.
viable career possibility.
Yeah.
Um, there are people pumping out books, a book a month, two books a month. The market is already saturated, and you can see this in the way that in how much ads cost, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And that we all talk about discoverability is the biggest problem. That like
mhm.
if the market wasn't already saturated, discoverability wouldn't be an issue. But
But
it's yeah.
yeah, but this is an issue with any industry,
Hmm.
right? We were lucky enough, those, and I say those of us, I wasn't actually among these, the indie authors
Yeah,
who
me neither, man. I know where
who
you're
got
going. Me
started
neither.
in the early 2010s,
Yep.
right? They were lucky enough to get in on the ground floor and have natural discoverability through
Yep.
Amazon's algorithm in a way that simply isn't possible anymore.
Yep.
And it is now pay to play. Guess what? Any industry, except right at the very beginning, is all pay to play. The world
Mhm.
runs on ads.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that putting out more content is necessarily going to fix any of these problems with being able to make more money or be more discoverable, because it's still going to take money to gain visibility, and that's not going to change. But what I think, and Joanna Pan talks about this as well. I listened to her podcast, and she's,
Yeah,
of
she's
course, very big
phenomenal.
into AI.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. She believes that it's going to be more of a, or at least what she wants to do is take more of an artisan approach and really spend more time crafting it. And I think that's what AI is going to allow us to do. Yes, it's going to make us more productive and we could do more, but that gives us time to focus on other things.
Mm,
I found myself, I've had a lot more time lately that I've started spending more time learning ads and marketing and
mm,
things like that. We'll be able to spend more time polishing the book and not just trying to pump them out once a month without, with uh, the bare minimum on your editing and all of that.
mm,
Actually spending more time to make it really good. I think that is more likely to be where this goes.
mm.
Um, but certainly being more productive is nice too. I have about 347 books that I'd like to write in my lifetime, and I
Just a
certainly won't be
small
able to
amount.
do it without, yeah,
Yeah,
won't be able to do it without some help
that's
for
awesome.
sure.
So on your channel, you're focusing on ChatGPT 4, and I've heard you say multiple times in your videos that you like that one the best because of the language model.
Hmm.
What other programs are you seeing writers use? Like if a writer, because I will say, and we'll talk more about like prompting and stuff in a second. I will say that learning to prompt ChatGPT does require kind of a brain flip at times where you have to
Yes.
like just kind of rethink, oh, this is how I'm approaching that. Um, are there ones that you found that like for a beginning writer maybe easier to jump into right away?
That's a good question. ChatGPT is not the only tool that I use.
Okay.
Um, it is the one I kind of recommend people start with
Okay.
because first of all, the 3.5 model is free. You can play around with it however much you want.
Yeah,
Um, and that mind flip you're talking about, I think that's an important mind flip to get into,
that's fair.
to understand because most AI models require some understanding of how it's going to react to your prompt.
Hmm.
Um, I use ChatGPT primarily for brainstorming and for outlining and other things along those lines. So creating characters, um, yeah, creating my outline, world building.
Yeah, I've seen you use it a lot for plot beats, like
Hmm.
taking your outline and driving it to plot beats, driving it to scene structure, all that kind of
Exactly.
stuff.
And
Yeah.
that's a really great way to do it. The way the method that I go over in my YouTube channel, it's kind of incremental. We start with the very core idea and then we expand that a little bit and then flesh it out a bit more, make it our own. And then we
Hmm.
take that and we expand that a little bit more and then flesh that out and make it our own. And then expand that into an outline and make that our own. And then expand each chapter of your outline into something even more fleshed out. And from there, you can go into actually writing the prose.
Hmm.
But that's ChatGPT. And if you could only pick one tool, that is probably still the one I would recommend. There are several others right now. Right now, there's a competitor of OpenAI called Anthropic has made a tool called Claude,
Okay.
which is not as widely available as ChatGPT, but it's actually really good for writing. I haven't played around with it too much, so I haven't made any videos about it yet, but I probably will in the near future.
I
It
have I'm in a private Slack group that plays with it, and I've
Yeah,
been
and
watching them play with it, and it it's hard to distinguish between the language models because it's like you'd almost have to prompt them with the exact same thing at the exact same time to see how
mhm,
they respond. I know the writers that are using it are more comfortable with Claude. They feel like it's less locked down, if that makes
mm,
sense. Like
yeah,
you can get it to write a spicy romance scene much easier than like Chat GPT. You got to kind of teach it that spicy romance is okay, and then
yeah,
you then you can get it to write a scene for you. But Claude's just like, yeah, I'll just go all in.
Yeah, and that's definitely an issue as well. If you write erotica or if you write, I don't know, some really heavy horror
Yeah,
story,
yeah, no,
you know,
yeah, all of that.
ChatGPT will, yeah, it won't, you're gonna have to write some bits yourself, probably.
Yeah.
The other tool that I use though is called Pseudowrite. If you're into writing fiction with AI, you maybe heard of it. I think it's largely considered to be the best, most complete tool for authors that want to write fiction with AI. Um, I wasn't too hot on it before because I felt like, well, most of the stuff I can do here, I can do with ChatGPT, and Pseudowrite has word limits. So if you go over the word limit, you only get a certain number of
Mm.
words for your subscription.
Oh, that's a bummer.
It is, and ChatGPT, it's also a subscription, but you essentially get unlimited words with it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I still recommend ChatGPT for mostly for things like brainstorming, where you're
Hmm.
bouncing ideas off of the AI
Yeah.
and you're going back and forth and using up words that way. It's kind of important that you have um, that just the freedom to just keep going back and forth
Yeah,
like
you
that.
don't want to be thinking about like, okay, I'm at 30,000 words. If I write 10,000 more, I owe them 20 more dollars. Like,
Right, exactly.
you
You
don't
don't
want to
want
be
to be
doing
thinking
that,
about that.
especially when
But
you're learning, especially when you're learning. Yeah.
yeah, but I will say Sudowrite recently, and I don't think this is out yet for the general public, but I managed to get in on the beta. They have this tool coming out soon called Story Engine, which basically takes that same process I described on how I use ChatGPT, where you start with the kernel of an idea
Hmm.
and it expands that to synopsis, and then you expand the synopsis to an outline, and then you expand the outline to individual story beats, and then you take those beats and turn it into prose. It basically does that. And so it, I found it is actually quite a bit better and more convenient at writing the actual prose than ChatGPT is. ChatGPT still does well, but you have to really wrestle with the prompting to get
Interesting.
it
You gotta find
to
it.
write prose cleanly.
Yeah.
And so right now doing kind of a hybrid approach where I do everything except writing prose in ChatGPT, and
Mhm.
then I will take all of that, input it into Story Engine in Sudowrite, so it has all of that background info, and then use that to generate the actual prose. And I found it to work really, really well.
Interesting.
And so that's now my process. And the thing with AI is that it is constantly changing. And
Mm.
so, like Claude, for example, like I said, I haven't had much time to talk about it, but a lot of writers are using it, and it didn't exist on my radar just a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
right? And it could be that ChatGPT will come out with some new feature in, next week that'll make me say, okay, we no longer need to use Sudowrite, or Sudowrite might do something else to make it even better, where I am recommending them. So the things are
Uh,
moving so fast in AI that it's hard to keep on track of it. And so that's one of the reasons why I created the YouTube channel, is so I could focus specifically on fiction and how writers can write books using AI.
What's the what I'll share mine if you share yours. What's the weirdest thing you've written fiction wise with ChatGPT so far?
Oh man,
I can go first. What do you think? I'm
weirdest thing.
Yeah, I'm writing a serialized story in which I pretend to be different characters and I talk to ChatGPT and I let it respond to the character I'm pretending to be. I take the entire scene, I copy and paste it into a doc, and then I go through and I give ChatGPT inner thoughts in the voice of Vince Vaughn from Swingers. That's the weirdest thing I've done with it so far. And it's a
Well,
lot of fun. It
I'll
takes me
tell
like
you,
7 minutes to do a scene, and it's great. I love
I am not that creative.
it.
I remember
Creative or
when
weird.
ChatGPT first came out, that one of the first prompts I gave it was write a story about Sherlock Holmes meeting Tarzan.
Nice. How did that
And
come out?
it's actually a story I want to do in real life. I want to do this like pulpy meeting of famous pulp heroes,
That's fun. I love that.
but it spat out this whole thing where Sherlock Holmes goes to the jungle and they meet each other and they think each other is so awesome. And they just keep giving each other compliments of how amazing they are, and then they sort of like walk into the jungle together, and you're like, "Woo, what kind
Yeah,
of meeting was this?"
that's really funny.
Um, Although I will say the book that I'm currently writing and documenting my process on the YouTube channel, it might be a little weird for some. It's kind of there's an actual name for it that I learned recently. It's called necromantic fantasy. Basically,
Necromantic fantasy.
so yeah, it's a undead romance essentially. Although I'm playing it down,
I'm
uh,
here for that. I'm
because
here for that.
I'm a clean fantasy author, so I'm
Yeah.
playing it down. But
Wasn't
um,
there a movie like probably 5 years ago about a zombie that falls in love with a living girl?
yes, it was like Romeo and Juliet, but with zombies.
Yeah, but it was zombies. It was
Um,
fantastic. It was great.
yeah, it's basically that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm to and I mean, there's the whole I hate that I know this, but I have children. There's Disney has a whole series called Zombies, and the premise of it is that there's a boy zombie who is the head football star of the high school and a, you know, human cheerleader, and they fall in love. That's the entire premise of they've done four, no, three. Oh man, I hate that I know this. They've done three musicals from it. I can sing you a number if you want, because my 8-year-old watches it a lot.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah. Yeah, in the
Okay, well,
second one they bring in in
I
the
guess it's
third one
not
they
as
bring in
niche as I thought it
aliens.
was. Nice.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I love in the story like the narrative that you're living right now. I love that you were able to take this tool, you were able to overcome a really low point, you were able to use it to accelerate your writing, and now it's accelerating your creativity. I think that's really awesome. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
because this novel I'm writing right now would not have existed
Yeah,
if
no,
it
that's
weren't for
great.
AI.
Yeah.
And the
I
nice thing
also
about AI is it allows me to branch out and say, oh, this little side project that is like this weird, wacky idea that I had, I might give that a try just because I can,
yeah.
even though in the way it used to be, I might not have done so because, I need to focus on writing to market or
Hmm.
doing whatever, because you only have so much time in the day, so you need to focus on what's going to give you the best returns. And now, you still want to appeal to that, but I think this is actually going to give us more freedom to be creative and to try new things that we wouldn't necessarily have tried before.
Yeah, I think that's Seth Godin had a series of two podcasts. This was probably a month ago, where he talked about the beauty of AI for artisans is that there is a constant temptation to be mediocre, to just give enough to the market and move on to the next thing. And he's like, but now with these kind of tools, good enough is not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
You have to let it drive you to be creative, and you have to like break out of what is expected.
And there's actually a really good historical precedent for this. The rise of photography.
Interesting.
Before photography, the main employment of any artist was to uh,
Like
paint
portraiture.
portraits of
Fascinating.
people. That was their income.
Yeah.
Come, photography comes along, totally eliminates the need for that particular line of work.
Mm,
And, it's people are right to be scared about AI. It's going to disrupt a lot of jobs, but which is what photography did to artists to fine art.
hmm.
But you look at the movements in art that happened after the rise of photography. We get impressionism, we get cubanism, we get all of these things. We get these amazing painters like Monet and I'm not an art historian, so I may get some of this wrong, but um, Van Gogh, Monet, Picasso.
Yeah. Well, one might question if you'd ever have a Salvador Dali if you didn't have photography,
Yeah, it
right?
just
Like,
created these whole
yeah.
new movements of art And then people found out that photography was also an art. It was just a different art.
Hmm.
And so I think very in a lot of ways AI is going to be very much the same thing. It's going to be in the future, it's going to be looked at as not the same art, it's going to be looked at as a completely different art.
Mm.
And then the previous arts, right? Actual, painting or illustration in the realm of actual art, as well as actually writing the words yourself, all of that is going to take on wholly new forms of creative expression, yeah, as a reaction against AI.
Yeah,
And
I love that optimism. That's really great.
yeah, that's just my take on it.
Yeah,
But I really do feel like we are heading towards a very interesting future. It's going to change a lot, but in that change, we're going to see whole new forms of creative expression that never existed before, just like what happened with the rise of photography.
that's awesome. So speaking of AI as an art, you talk a lot in your videos about prompt writing for ChatGPT 4 as a skill.
Hmm.
Could you just talk about what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe to someone who hasn't played around with AI. When in my first attempts at using AI, I was really disappointed, and I think a lot of people it is this way where you get in, you ask it to do something for you, and then it gives you just a mediocre response, and you're like, well, this isn't great. I couldn't possibly write a book with
Boo.
this. This is
Yeah.
lame.
Oftentimes it proves you're negative. If you
Hmm.
come in, you're like, this sucks, watch it suck. And then it
Yeah,
sucks. And you're like, see, I told you it sucks. Yeah.
but there's definitely proof that it is a skill to prompt when you look at the difference between someone who's just, throwing whatever at the AI and expecting amazing results from
Mm,
someone who's carefully crafting their prompt and then getting amazing results out of it. And this applies to writing, it also applies to art. I've noticed some of the best artwork generated by Midjourney or some of these other art programs are coming from artists who know what they're talking about and who have spent time learning how to prompt the engines that are being used. And with writing, it's the same way. If you're just asking it a question and expecting, you know, if you just ask it for a Stephen King novel, you're going to be disappointed, right?
yeah.
You've got to understand how a Stephen King novel works and then, you know, iterate and work back and forth with it. Now, I'm not saying go out there and say, write me a novel in the style of Stephen King, because I do think there are some ethical issues there. But my point is, when prompting, it's not enough to just give it one prompt and be done. You've got to experiment, you've got to iterate, you've got to pivot. So
Hmm.
if it gives you an answer and you're like, okay, this isn't quite what I wanted, you can then discuss it with the AI. And sometimes it takes a little bit back and forth, and then finally you get to it and you're like, that's it. And the
Yeah.
AI was capable of creating those amazing results the whole time. It just required the right prompt or
Yeah.
sequence of prompts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to plug you for a minute. Nerdynovelist.com. You've got a good, like a really great white paper on like, hey, here are some prompts to start with. So if you don't know where to start, I downloaded your white paper. I liked it a lot. It's a strong, like, hey, here's good prompts that you can start moving with.
Thanks.
What kind of language have you found helpful, um, that you would recommend authors play with?
The main thing that I have found to be helpful with AI you need to give it some kind of framework. And that has been, and thank you for the plug there. A
Oh
lot
yeah.
of the a lot of the prompts that I put in that sheet are some kind of framework. And a good example of this is the video I did on outlining. I used an outline template that ChatGPT did not know, because it knows some. It knows Hero's Journey and Save the Cat and all of that. I used one called the 24 chapter novel outline, which was developed by Derek Murphy, who's a great guy. You should go listen to everything he has to say. Um, but what I did is I basically took a summarized version of what that outline looked like
Mhm.
and fed it into ChatGPT and then fed it my synopsis and said, okay, take this synopsis and create an outline using the structure I just gave you.
Mhm.
And he was able to do that relatively well. And
And what's nice about the iterative prompts is that you can give it that, you can teach it that structure.
mhm,
You can be like, hey, this is the 24 novel structure, and then just hit, enter, and it'll be like, this structure is nice. I like it. And then, I
mhm,
mean, it's not going to say that, but it just gives you back a reply. But now, if as long as you're in that same thread, it's going to remember what you just taught it. And you
mhm.
can then play off of that memory. Sorry, I'm just clarifying what you said for people who have never used it before so that they're
Yeah.
not like freaking out about it. Because you can give it that, you can teach it something. You can spend like 15 prompts teaching it things. You can be like,
Uh-huh.
hey, here's the novel structure I want. Here's this thing that I want you to know.
Here's some
Here's this thing
information
that,
about
yeah,
the characters.
yeah, totally. And then be like,
Here,
all right,
yeah,
now write this scene. Yeah.
yeah. And it's really great. And this is why, as we were talking at the beginning of the show, why it requires a fundamental knowledge of how storytelling works.
Yeah.
Because without a knowledge of these frameworks to feed into the AI, to teach the AI, you're just going to get a very basic response. It's not good enough yet. I mean, maybe one day it will be, but um, it's not good enough yet where it can just do that without instruction. And another good example is copywriting. So I do a little bit of copywriting for my job. Copywriting is extremely formulaic. You're trying to come up with headlines or information about a product or whatever. There are very specific frameworks, and you can go out and pick up any book on copywriting. It will give you those frameworks. All you have to do is figure out a way to translate that framework into a prompt,
Hmm.
and you can feed it that and say, I want a headline with these three elements, and then you give it a list of what those elements could be, and then it'll spit out 20 different headlines for you in that style using your information. And it's just amazing what you can come up with using that. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it is cool. I was doing it for I was redoing the about page on one of my websites. And before I had ChatGPT, if I was doing the about page, I would pull out my story brand book. I would recap my story brand book to myself. I'd like outline the story brand and what I was going to do. And then I'd like write it probably 3 or 4 times. It's like, okay, make
Yep.
it work. So instead, I was like, hey, ChatGPT, here's what story brand is. Like, here's how you function a story brand. Here's the formula. I was like, and then I was like, write this for this. This is the sale. Like, this is the person I'm selling to. These are the experiences I have. Um, this is the product I'm selling. Go. And it
Yeah.
gave me, a good like about page, like about me page in the story brand format. And then it was like, all right, now I can take that and iterate it to like make it my own. Like I copied and pasted it and I edited it and I moved some things around. And I was like, this feels more like what I would write. But it is that kind of like having the knowledge of what you want to do, teaching the model, and then letting the model accelerate what you're already using. It's a lot. It reminds me a lot of. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, but he talks about in there how great companies don't use technology to reinvent things. They use technology to accelerate what they're already doing.
Hmm.
And when I watch you use AI, a lot of times I see you accelerating, like, hey, this is how I write a novel. And so I know how I write a novel. I'm going to use this new tool to accelerate what I would already be doing anyway, which I think is a positive use
Yeah.
of it. Um, Talk about when you iterate prompts. So like ChatGPT gives you something and you read it and then you're like, I want it a little bit more this way. What's your process? How are you like reading and thinking about how you want to get it to give you something else?
That's it's kind of it's kind of an art.
Okay.
It's hard to describe. I was working with Sudowrite, and it was giving me a lot of chapters, and I was, I'd read through the chapters, and not everything was that great, right?
Yeah.
And that's normal if you're working with AI, especially when you're just starting out. And so the key part is to basically identify what about it isn't great,
Okay.
and then
So look for
find a
the
way to
weakness.
prompt in a way that compensates for that. So in my case, it was coming up with a lot of really cheesy metaphors, and it was always like happy chum chum all the time. There was no conflict. And so I was having to rewrite large sections of it because of this. And so in fact, this is when I went to the group and I said, "Do anyone know how to get it to stop being this way?" And by the way, this is the AI writing for authors group, started by Steph Pajonas, I
On
think,
Facebook.
yeah, on Facebook. It's
Yeah,
a great,
fantastic
great
group.
group.
Yeah, you can find
Uh,
me there too. I'm
yeah.
lurking. Yeah.
And one of the things that people said was just ask it to not write cheesy dialogue. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Can it
Because
be that simple? Yeah.
in pseudo right there is a space where you can give it the style. And so and put there I put there I said no mushy dialogue, no mushy metaphors. Um and there you have to sometimes try it over and over again. But
Yeah.
eventually I got to the point where I would spend maybe an hour editing a chapter, and now I spend half of that,
Hmm.
just because every time I write a chapter, I can identify things like this isn't quite right. In some cases, it's just like, well, I can't really change that. Like, I just gotta fix that myself. Or in some cases, I could be like, I'm seeing a trend here with the output. Let's see if I can tweak the prompt a little bit so that it's not so bad.
Interesting. I like that. I like that approach to be like, hey, what's weak about this? And then I'm going to iterate to like push it in one direction or another. Do you ever find yourself like pushing it in a direction and being like, oh, that was the wrong direction?
I feel like there should be. I can't really think of any off the top of my head.
I mean, I did it today.
Oh
That's one
yeah.
of the reasons I ask it. I ask it. I was like, I was just playing. I was screwing around. I put one of my chapters in, like not a full chapter, but like 1,000 words of one of my chapters, and I was like, make this because I went through at one point and I created a style guide from it. I was like, what define the style of this writer, and then I was like, give it to me in outline form. So it gave me like bullet points of like, here's the style of Neil Gaiman. When I say the style of Toni Morrison, here's what I'm looking for. When I say the style of Aaron Sorkin, here's what I'm looking for. So
Hmm.
I have that in one of my little like sidebars on ChatGPT. So when I'm playing with stuff, I'll be like, I wonder what this would sound like in the style of such and such. I'll go to the style guide and I'll be like, the style of Aaron Sorkin is this, and then I'll put, and it's like, that is the style of Aaron Sorkin. And I'll be like, this is like, take this chapter and redo it in that style. Um, again, just to play, like, just to see, like, for me, I'm not doing that to publish those things in that style. I'm doing that to teach myself, like, hey, I want to write more like Aaron Sorkin. What would my chapter look like? Like, what's going
Hmm.
to change if I could have a master who fully understands Aaron Sorkin's style take my words and make them like that? And I remember I did it with one of my chapters, and it, it was I gave it like a mellow chapter, and all of a sudden it was really intense, and I was like, okay, I gotta back it out, I gotta back it out. It's like,
Yep.
this is no good, this is no good.
I I'll tell you one of my favorite prompts that I ever did. I said, write me a version of Mary Had a Little Lamb in the style of H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh,
And it was one of the most hilarious
oh,
things I have ever seen in my life.
that's an amazing prompt. I love it.
I'm not even gonna like try and quote what it was like. I said,
Yeah.
just go do that one, everybody.
That's
Just
fantastic.
go try that one. It's fun.
Yeah, that's a really great one. Um, so what kind of, I've seen you using a lot of like style terms. Like you use the phrase high concept a lot. Um,
Hmm.
or you have like is it the Fleischman style? I can't remember. The F.
the Fleisch.
Fleish.
I don't even know
We
how
could
it's
both sit
pronounced.
here and like mispronounce this
The
word terribly.
Fleisch. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say Flesh.
Excellent.
Spelled Flesch, I think. The Flesh reading E's score. Yeah, I did a
Yeah.
video on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Where are you finding those like are you doing research on those technical terms or those just terms you know? Like how are you coming about
in
finding
the
those
case of
tweaks?
in the case of those specific ones, those were just terms I knew.
Nice.
Um, the high concept pitches idea, which by the way, a high concept pitch is basically if I said the phrase Jaws on pause, you immediately know what I'm talking about. Or Harry Potter, but goth.
Yeah.
And and Harry Potter but goth, guess what? That's the show Wednesday on Netflix.
Yeah.
Um,
That's an excellent point.
and so it's just like if you can boil down your pitch to something like that where people immediately understand the gist of it, that's what a high concept pitch is. And that's something I actually learned in college from a book I read. And it always stuck with me. And so I remember when I did that video, I went and pulled that book out because I still have it, and I looked it up to make sure I had the right idea and just put that into my prompt. I think I could have done it better and maybe given it some examples because that's another thing, again, we're talking about teaching the AI what your ideal result looks like. So I could have given it some examples and then seen what it gave me. But yeah, that was one I happen to know already.
That's fun. Um, any other big phrases that you'd be like, hey, this is a fun one to play with?
Um, I think one of my favorite things to play around with right now is just different styles. And kind of like you were saying with developing your style guide, I think I would caution people against saying, write me this thing in the style of Brandon Sanderson or, whoever your guy
Yeah,
is.
if you publish that, that might get you into trouble in the future.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't
you
do
definitely
that.
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But
To
I
be
think
clear, I'm
there's,
doing it to learn. I'm like, hey, what does this look like for my own learning? But yeah.
but yeah, breaking it down the way you are, saying, okay, I want to study this person's style, give me some information about what this person's style is like, and it'll give you some things, and then you can kind of pick and choose, like I want this little aspect and this aspect, and work on creating and I'll call it a synthetic style
Mm.
that is kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different other things. Um, you can really go a long way doing that, and but yeah, don't copy someone's style. Don't tell it to do it in the style of a specific author, but you can learn from what that author
Yeah,
writes.
it's an interesting I find taking my own writing and doing it in the style of somebody else and then comparing the two is a very good learning exercise for me because I
Yeah.
see like, oh, this is how this person would have done this thing that I tried to do. Um, again, you'll get yourself into trouble, I think, at some point if you're publishing things in the style of blah blah blah. But I think I try to think of writing of the craft of writing like playing a sport. And I can remember like when I was playing baseball, we would watch videos of pitchers and like how they stood on the mound and how they like kicked their leg and how they like pushed off with their other leg and they all did it a little bit differently, like where they moved their arm. And it was one of those things of like, if I really love that style of pitcher, I'm going to do my best to try to mimic it, but I had to watch them do it. And this is just a deeper way of watching for me. Like I can read Aaron
Hmm.
Sorkin's scripts all day long, but I don't know what I'm missing. So being able to like take this tool and learn a style, use it to learn a style by comparing it to my work, by contrasting it from my work, by like, even asking at one point, instead of saying like rewrite this in the style, I asked like, what would change about this if I wanted it in X style? And it was
Hmm.
it gave me like a paragraph of like, hey, here's what that style is and here's how it would change.
And I would challenge authors to have it write the same prompt over and over and over again, and the only thing you change is some information on the style, because
Hmm.
that's a really great way to get it to the point where it's something you like. Um, I've been doing this a little bit with writing for websites, um, because it can be very, very different, the output that it gives you if you ask it to be conversational versus um, academic, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And those are two very simple examples. Right now, my style, when I give it a prompt, I'll usually say in such and such style, but it's not just like a few words. I usually give it like two or three sentences.
Mm.
Say do this and not this and include this kind of writing, and that's come over a lot of practice iterating and optimizing for the right style for me, at least for online like web writing.
Yeah, and I think just to go back to as we wrap up what you said earlier is that like how we're throwing out all these different ways to use it. Like I use it for learning. I'm a motivated learner, right? Like I am motivated to write when I'm learning about writing. So like
Hmm.
that's something that motivates me. You're using it for outlining, for building, for breaking down plots, for you know building out your work, and that's motivating your writing. I think the key is to like figure out what motivates you and use it for that, right? Like as
Hmm.
opposed to trying to just copy what other people are doing. I think learning from other people, like watching your videos. I learned a ton watching your videos. I thought they're fantastic. But like watching the videos and then but I didn't go and be like, okay, I'm now going to do this thing, right? Like I learned about like how you're writing prompts and was like, oh, that's interesting. I need to start keeping a prompt bank. I need to like start structuring my prompts in specific ways. Like, yeah. So just to encourage anybody listening, like it is, you do not have to use it in a specific way. You do not have to, like Jason, you were saying earlier, you do not have to crank out 1,000 novels a day. Like that is not,
Right.
this is just a tool and there's 1,000 ways to use it. So find the way that motivates you to keep writing.
And
Okay.
I would add on to that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, please do. Please do.
I would add on to that. I think we all think of writing as kind of one thing that we do, right? But really, the act of writing is a sequence of a whole bunch of different things. It's brainstorming, it's plotting, it's daydreaming, it's coming up with characters, it's putting the words down on the page. That's part of it, but that's one very small part. It's editing, it's various types of editing even. Um, and then for indie authors, there's also marketing and all these other things that go into it. And I would say that AI can help in any of all of those areas, but should not help in all of them.
Hmm.
You should find the areas that you love to do and continue to do those as you would normally do it. And then identify which of all of that entire process from beginning to end is the most painful for you, and
Hmm.
then maybe give AI a chance in that specific area of your writing process. For me, for example, now for the purposes of the YouTube channel, I'm writing a novel from scratch and I'm using AI at every step in the process.
Hmm.
I'm doing that just because it's for the YouTube channel so I can demonstrate each step, but I would not normally do that in my other process because, for example, I really love outlining. I have no intention of using AI for most of my outlining of future books
Hmm.
because that's the part that I enjoy the most. And even using it with AI, I've been supplementing heavily, let's just say,
Hmm.
with my own information that I write in there. The biggest pain point for me is the actual putting words down on the page.
Hmm.
I wrote an article and I turned this into a YouTube video as well that I'm a writer who hates writing, right? And what I mean by that is I hate this specific step in the
Yeah.
writing process. Um, the rest of writing I enjoy quite a lot, but find what that pain point is. Use AI to maybe help you along in that area, and then don't worry about the rest of it. The rest, if you enjoy doing it, just keep doing it the way you've
Hmm.
been doing it.
That's great. That's a fantastic last word. I love that. So Jason, I'm gonna encourage everybody to go to the Nerdy Novelist YouTube channel, watch your stuff, go to the nerdynovelist.com, grab your prompt sheet, start playing around. It's really great. Um, and thanks for coming on, man. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. This has been fun.
good. I'm gonna hit stop and we can talk a little bit more.
All right.